Without any more chatter from me, I'm delighted to introduce Dulce Espelosin, who is a Mexican conservation professional currently residing in the US. She holds a degree in communication and media sciences and is a certified professional facilitator. In 2020, Dulce received the Distinguished Service Award from the Society of Conservation Biology's Latin American and Caribbean section for her pioneering work on behavior change and community outreach. I could go on, but it's better that you hear from her than from me, and so I'm going to pass things over to Dulce.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you everybody for being here. I'm very glad and honored to be invited to this conference and to work with all of you. I know all of you are super into the science and into the biology of all of the insects in the world, so I appreciate the opportunity to be sharing with you what I do, which is behavior change. And yes, I know some of you are in different parts of the world, so I guess good morning, good afternoon, good night. Hopefully this is going to be a good session to close, because I know you have a lot of speakers already that has been happening in the past. So I will try to make it fun, also interesting, and hopefully you can enjoy this session to learn about human behavior and human science and everything related to work in the conservation area with people. So that's my area. So please reach out whenever you need. We will have a space at the end of the plenary to have some questions and answers, and you can start typing anything in the chat. Elisa will help me to read at the end so we don't miss anything. So please, if you have something in the middle of the session, just write it there so we don't miss it, and we will read it together later. So with that said, yes, welcome to this Friday and Behavior Change Fundamentals. Again, my name is Dulce Espelosin. Pleasure to meet you all. And let me just start a little bit with what we are going to cover today. So, as I know it's Friday and it's late, I want to start by doing this icebreaker. And I want you to please use the chat to start having a little fun with a series of 3 questions that I have for you about insects and human behavior. So feel free to share the answers there in the chat. And the idea is that you can start thinking, if you could swap places with any insect for a day, which one would you choose? And you can pick any insect that fascinates you or excites you, whether it's a speedy dragonfly or a tiny whatever ant, ladybug, something like that. You can write it in the chat. But also, please make sure that you add a sentence or a word of what is the main quality of that insect that made you choose it. Is because it's resilient, the social behavior it has, or maybe because they're unique survival skills, something that is just very special for you to that insect. And then lastly, please just also answer what would you say is the main human threat to that insect. And some examples, for example, for that could be urbanization, agriculture, roads and infrastructure, climate change, whatever you think that it's threatening and it's somehow linked to human behavior. So please write those 3 things in the chat so we can start jumping in here. I'm going to mute myself so you can think about it. And Elisa, if you are there and you can start sharing some of these, reading some of these, I will appreciate that.
Unmute myself. Barrett would like to be a eusocial insect capable of perceiving the world in a manner unlike humans, like a Polybia wasp. Matt would like to be a California tortoiseshell butterfly because they spend the heat of summer lazing around in the alpine. That was also going to be my answer. I would just like to be any butterfly that's going to sit around in the sun and can also fly. Jessica would be an Arctic tree-line emerald dragonflies, and they are threatened by habitat loss and warming temperatures. Luciana would be a termite to understand how they build nests, and they're threatened by habitat destruction. Tom would be a longhorn Texas milkweed beetle because of their unique biogeography and ecology, and the main threat to them is habitat loss. Chris would be any dragonfly that does long distance movements to see more of the world. Katie would also be a dragonfly because of their strong flying skills, and the first threat that comes to mind is cars. The second is mismatch of habitat and life cycle due to climate change. And Barrett would also, in addition to being some sort of eusocial insect, would like to be an ice crawler to see what it's like living within such a narrow temperature range, or a web spinner. Barrett, you were supposed to pick one, or a web spinner to be like Spider-Man. And Christy would like to be a cockroach because she feels industrious and misunderstood, and probably humans out to get cockroaches all the time are the main threat to them.
Yes, thank you for that. And as you can see, this is very interesting. And thank you for all those amazing skills that you just shared. I've been learning in these little few minutes with all of you about insects, and it's very interesting. Thank you for that. So yes, as you can see, for example, I would love to be, for example, a ladybug for the day because it's cute shape. It has vibrant colors and also the ability to fly. But sadly, monoculture, which is, farming as a major threat because some of the ladybugs needs that diversity of plants, and that of course reduces the plant diversity and limits food sources. So for me, that's something that I've been thinking today just to share with you, and something that I can go over during the presentation. But I know that we have many different other human behaviors that, as you can see, are somehow threatening the insects. And so we can also think about other threats for other type of species and habitats in general. So therefore, it's why human behavior is very important, and it's super important to always think about the threats that are behind the species that we want to preserve, because that's the only way that, if you think about it, we can understand how we can work with the people that is surrounding them. So in this course, of course, hopefully you will have some type of basic knowledge and tools and strategies necessary to start inspiring meaningful behavior change within your target audiences, especially in the context of the conservation efforts. Because yes, we will also cover a little bit of why you need to design and segment your target audience and why it's important to have that. So welcome again to Behavior Change for Fundamentals. And yes, I want to keep asking you, how many times have you attempted to stick to a diet plan? Just in general, just think about it. You don't need to answer, but just think about it. Or maybe you have tried to be more punctual in your daily activities, or maybe you have tried to eat healthier meals, or maybe you sometimes have to try get fitter or start saving money. And these are something that, if you think about it, are very simple behaviors that each of us can start, having as some of our promises for New Year's. And whenever, you are eating the grapes at the end of the year, if you eat the grapes, maybe you are thinking in this as the ways that you are promising to be better about your self-health and, exercise more, etc., etc. But also, I know that sometimes we are not successful in that, because changing a behavior, even those simple behaviors that we think as daily behaviors, are very hard to change. And every time that we need and we have to make and choose between one or other meal, sometimes we hesitate and we have, some doubts, and we choose one over the other, maybe because it's easier, maybe because it's faster, maybe because it's even more delicious. But sometimes you see that the emotion takes over the rationale. So it's important that whenever you are thinking in how to work with humans, you always consider those two elements as well. The behavior, it's related to the emotion and how we choose the things, but also with the rationale. So just start thinking on that, because yes, changing a behavior is possible. It's hard, difficult, but yes, it's possible. And this is a positive news, because while it doesn't make the process easier, it does makes achievable and opens our minds to thinking differently, focusing on the possibilities, steps, and ways to address challenges rather than just dwelling on the impossibilities. This is where we need to start being creative, solution-oriented, and effective changing catalysts. Because now you have to start wearing, in this session today, for 1 hour, the hat of being change catalysts or change makers. Because if you want to start thinking in the insects or other species that you want to preserve, you need to start thinking on how to change behaviors within the communities. So I want to invite you as well to start thinking in the way that it's full of possibilities, because we always have two ways to think. And if we have the desire to make things happen, if you think about it, it also depends on how you choose to see the things. You want to see the goals and the milestones as a linear sequence that eventually, if you follow all the steps, will take you to your goal. Or do you think and want to see things as a vertical line that is very hard to reach and even impossible? So if you just open your mind a little bit and think about the processes and the steps, you can see that maybe something that seems super hard to achieve is not that hard with the right tools and the right techniques. And today we're going to cover some of that. And some of the realities about behavior change is that, of course, we need to be crystal clear about what we need others to do. We also need to share information and ideas and know that doesn't lead to change or action. Because sometimes when we read in a spectacular or mural something that says, for example, save the world, we know that we want to save the world. We want to save the world somehow, but maybe we don't know how. And so whenever we share the information with others and we want to preserve with them the insect or other species, if we just say something that is super broad and confusing, maybe they won't understand how to do it. So it's important that we start thinking on how to message correctly to our audiences. And yes, people need to understand the benefits and what they will gain before making a decision. Because we are human beings and we are selfish and we want to understand always what is in exchange. If I do this, I'm going to receive this back. So what is happening in that exchange? What I'm going to gain if I change this? And now that you're thinking in behaviors, you have to be more specific about it, because what I'm going to gain if I start exercising, I'm going to lose weight and then I'm going to look better or I'm going to feel better. That's an exchange. But if I don't understand that, maybe I will never start going to the gym and doing exercise. So as you can see, yes, behavior change is difficult, but again, yes, we can. So sometimes when we think of conservation invitations or messages we see out there or receive in our email or even in our houses, sometimes they ask for obvious things and sometimes even that are a little biased. So for example, everyone knows in here that yes, we need to take care of the ocean, but we know how? Because even if we live near to the ocean, but we are not, normal people that go and, do fishing or this type of use of different nets to do like industrial fishing, maybe I'm not threatening the ocean in any way. So how can I save the ocean? How can I support the ocean? So sometimes you think these messages are a little confusing. So when you see questions like this, for example, do you know how to take care of the ocean? Do you really know? Because if you think about it, sometimes, again, it's not clear. And how do you think you can protect the forest? Maybe, I don't know, avoiding fires, maybe by not leaving my trash if I do a picnic, but I'm not really sure what else I can do. Or are you 100% sure on how to support the birds that are in need? I don't know. So as you see, these questions sometimes are not the right messages that people need to have in order to change behaviors. So today, as you're wearing your change catalyst hat, you need to think how to message correctly those messages to your audience. And so we need to think how can we do it so they can understand our petitions. And so again, we need to be crystal clear and we need to know who is our target audience. So let me just start with that because that's one of the first things that we need to start taking in consideration. So who are our audiences? Is the people that you're working with or are you aiming to work with this group of people? Maybe they are fishers, hunters, farmers, cattle ranchers, consumers, women, men, young people. who are the people that is near to the threatened species or the habitat? Who are the group of people that consume whatever you are thinking in trying to reduce, or visit the place, the habitat that you're trying to protect, or live nearby the natural resource, or even they live by the natural resource. In other words, for example, they are farmers and they are, doing deforestation because they need to plant their crops. So therefore, they are living and also using the natural resource. So just coming back to my ladybug example, knowing that monoculture farming is the major threat as it reduces plant diversity and limits food sources, I know that the farmers are my target audience for the ladybug. But this is also the moment to consider how many farmers I have the capacity to work with. And I don't want to underestimate the power that you all might have in terms of reaching audiences in here, but let's say that we can reach an entire city. So that city, it's called City X. So City X has 2 million people. So try to estimate how many of those are farmers. For just this example, let's say that 100,000 farmers live in that city. Then that will be my target audience, the 100,000 farmers of City X. So as you can see, knowing this can help me to really, really know what are the type of messages that I'm going to share with them, what are the type of practices that I might be able to start working with them. And I also know the threat for my species that I want to preserve, which is the ladybug. And I know monoculture is the threat, so I need to reduce that and change them to the new practices or adapt their practices into the polycultive. So for that, if you start thinking about it, I also need to provide some solutions. I also need to be clear about what I'm asking them to do, but I also need to take in consideration them, because it's not that easy maybe for them just to change one day to the other from monocultive to polycultive. So let's talk about it. Again, let's come back to the realities and sharing the information that it's vague or not direct on how to do things differently can be confusing and most likely won't lead to any meaningful change. But also, if the target audience that I know right now who is doesn't see the benefit of changing, they are not likely to be changing anything or doing any shift. So if you think about it, and I come to this farmer and I say, hey, farmer, the monoculture practice you're using reduces plant diversity and limits food sources. Please switch to polyculture farming. What do you think they will say? What do you think the response will be? Do you think the farmer will immediately see the value in that suggestion? Of course, no. So now that I want is to start thinking how we can then proceed and make a more compelling message to them. So for example, if we come back to this, we need to take all of the realities in consideration, but I also need to start working with research. And all of you, of course, are experts in research, I guess. So I'm not going to go into that field, but I just want to share that the first step in behavior change is to gain clarity about the audience. And maybe you use research for biological and scientific purposes, but also think it is as a way to research the human behaviors and the human that are behind your threat and your species. So you can use research for social studies. So the current behavior affecting the conservation results, we know what it is, but we need to understand what is happening before forming a hypothesis, which comes from observation, interviews, and surveys. So for example, the hypothesis can be organized into a problem tree or a conceptual model, and should ideally be guided by a theory of change or a set of goals that can give you direction into what you are trying to change in your target audience minds. And once you have that hypothesis, we need to do the research. And this involves planning how to do surveys and how to interview our target audience, because we need to know the motivations for them to change to polyculture, for example. So I need to understand what are the reasons that that person is using only one type of crop. Maybe because they don't have enough water, maybe because they tried it in the past, but it didn't work. Maybe because they don't have the seeds, maybe because they don't know some of the basic of other types of cultivation. So I need to understand the reasons why they are doing what they are doing, but also the motivations for change. For example, saying, yes, I would like to change to this type of cultivation, polycultivation, if I receive the right seeds, if I have enough water, if I could have a proper training in the use of these new crops, maybe if I have some, free seeds to start trying. So the idea is that you can understand all of the motivations, all of the barriers for change that can be either technological, cultural, economical, political, even religious ones. So you have to understand that. And the way to do that is by doing research. And all of you know that we have these two types of research, the quantitative and the qualitative. And of course, in the biological world, you have different types of having indicators, but in the social world, we have some indicators that you can use and somehow gather baselines with surveys. And for this, quantitative research suggests and provide quantities, numbers, and all of this data, and will help us to establish this baseline to know where we are starting and maybe doing pre and post research, which will give us some impact evaluation in our projects. Meaning that at the beginning of the project, if I'm trying to protect the ladybug, let's say, I will start by understanding the farmer's mindset, the farmer's knowledge about other practices of how to work in the land. I will start by knowing if for them is something special to have the ladybug as well, and if they know the ladybug, and if they care about the ladybug. But then at the end of the project, we can also do the same service and just see if something changed. And with that, we can see if because of our project, there was a change. But again, this is quantitative research method, and it can be just for data and numbers. And then we have the qualitative research, which is very valuable, of course, in this type of social research as well. And is used mainly to understand qualities, details, and general information. So it will help us understand the deeper feelings, concerns, and motivations, offering clarity about who our target audience is and why they are doing what they are doing, and why might be interesting for them to change. The primary tools for this qualitative research can be observation, focus groups, in-depth interviews. All of these will have to be designed, of course, for the specific audience, the specific, things that we want to know about them, because every site is very special and unique, and we cannot just copy paste from other sites because we always want to be very specific about our target audience. So just make sure that whenever you are thinking to work with people, try to do some research, qualitative, to again, confirm who your target audience is, motivations and details about them and their behavior, and then quantitative to gather the baseline of change, and then measure at the end if you can, so you can see some impact evaluation. And once you have, this general knowledge about who your target audience is and why they are doing what they are doing and what are the options for change, please try to remember the questions that I was telling you before. And we need to know for this, where are they in the steps of change? Because the next part of this presentation is going to cover a little bit of what is called the stages for behavior change, or the transtheoretical model. But for that, you need to know that with the research, you can also know where they are in the terms of change, meaning that you need to also understand by asking them if, for example, they have tried before to switch to polyculture, or if they have tried before to do a different way to watering and using water properly or more efficiently in their lands, for example, if that's a problem. And with that, you will know where they are. So say that this is the transtheoretical model, or the stages of behavior change, which is also known. And it's a very helpful framework because it serves to encourage people to engage in insect or other species or habitat conservation. For us, the change maker, is important to start by understanding where they are in the process of change. The model includes 5 stages. The first one, and you always start by the bottom, is pre-contemplation. then contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. In the pre-contemplation stage, individuals might be unaware of the need for conservation. So raising awareness through educational content is key. So for example, going into the example of the ladybug, maybe they don't know that the way that they are or they have been doing some of the cultivation is threatening the ladybug. So maybe if you can share a little bit of the benefits of the ladybug at this point is also important for them to understand, and they can start doing some connection of the dots of why ladybugs are important for their habitat and for their specific crops and plots. So then you go into the part of contemplation, which is when they start recognizing the issue, but hesitate to act. At this point, sharing success stories and offering simple ways to get involved can help them move forward. So that means that at this stage, maybe they can start talking to you about the opportunities they have, about the trainings that you will offer, about the seeds that you can give them for free. So this is an opportunity for them to start thinking about don't doing anything to change and do some of the actions that you are proposing to start doing. So that will prepare them to move into some action or pre-action, which is the preparation stage, and is when they are getting ready to take action. So providing concrete opportunities like volunteering or, starting to attend to this training becomes essential. This is when you will make sure that they have everything that they need in order to be ready to take the action. So if you think about it, it will be, for example, making sure that they are already knowing how to manage all of the seeds. Maybe you help them to do some type of research about the land that they are, where they live, the weather, the elevation, something that it's proper for them to use in terms of other crops. And maybe for them in that moment, they are prepared. They feel like now they can take the next step, which is action. And this action stage is when they are actively participating in these conservation efforts, supporting the ongoing involvement, and they are helping even some of them with others to set the specific goals that are important to achieve in terms of, for example, saying that they will, have X or Y crops added to whatever they have at the beginning of the year. It's just taking action and making sure that they are trying. And whenever you think about change, and this is very important, think about gradually change, because change doesn't happen, again, one day to the other. It's gradual, and it takes time, and it takes a constancy in the efforts. So every time that you think about having an audience in the action, it's going to be very challenging. But maintaining, which is the last step of this transtheoretical model, is the hardest one. Because in this stage, the individuals have already integrated all of the conservation efforts into their routines, and they are continuing to advocate for the cause, reinforcing the commitment, celebrating their efforts, and encouraging, all of the actions that they have been doing and are contributing to the long-term insect or species conservation. And in here is when we can make sure that we somehow motivate them more to keep doing what they are doing and perhaps expanding a little bit more. So for example, in the ladybug example, let's say that they start in the action stage by having 1 hectare with polyculture as a way to try it and test it. Then maybe at year 2, they can expand to another hectare, and they can, start expanding as they move towards the final goal, which is that they have the whole plot as a polycultive, I will say, agricultural practice. So just to highlight, our main goal is the last one, and we need to support them, our target audience, in moving toward those steps until they reach the top of the ladder or the final stage, meaning we need to, make sure that they have all the solutions provided and all of the barriers are reduced so they can really, really achieve our last goal. And so, for example, just coming back to the CDX and the ladybug, let's say that they have tried switching to this polyculture before, but they couldn't before afford the amount of water required for the crops. They choose at that time, maybe this is the time to do everything that is related to that. And then please remember, maintenance is the more important part. So let me just share in here a question that I have. At this moment, do you think that the audience is more interested in learning the benefits that they will receive with the polycultive in terms of economical results, or do you think they will be more interested in the ladybug preservation? And you can write that in the chat. Exactly, economic. Yes, exactly, because you are talking to them in a way that they can understand the benefit, and that will reach, if you think about it, to your conservation efforts. But before that, you are working with them towards the economical goals. So if you think about it, you will do a social change that will lead into the conservation result that you are trying to achieve. So yes, it's complicated, but it's easy if you think about it as a way of a process. So in here, I'm going to play a video that Elisa is also going to help me to just make sure that we can hear properly. So you can see how change happens in reality and what are some of the elements that we need to take in consideration. Because as what you're saying is not only about the conservation effort, it's also about the economical and other motivations that our audience might have. So I'm going to hit play and let's just some thumbs up if you can hear it.
Psychologists know that there are two systems in our brains, the rational system and the emotional system. Jonathan Haidt, who's a psychologist at NYU, came up with a great analogy for these two systems. He said, think of your brain as a human rider atop an elephant. The rider represents the rational system. That's the part of us that plans and problem solves. The rider might do some analyzing and decide, hey, I want to go that way. But it's the elephant, representing the emotional system, that provides the power for the journey. The rider can try to lead the elephant or drag the elephant, but if these two ever disagree, who would you bet on? The elephant has a 6-ton weight advantage. And it's exactly that power imbalance that makes adopting new behaviors very hard. If you want this duo to head a new direction, you also need to think about the path, which represents the external environment. This duo is more likely to complete a journey if you can shorten the distance and remove any obstacles in their way. So bottom line, if you want to lead change, you've got to do 3 things. Give direction to the rider, knowledge of how to get to the destination. You've got to motivate the elephant, which means tapping into emotion. And finally, you need to shape the path to allow for easy progress. That's how change happens.
So yes, thank you, Elisa, for playing the video. And just as we start wrapping up, I just want to say that yes, as you can see, the elephant will always weigh more than the rider, meaning that our emotions, again, sometimes give us more power over the rational and the thinking and the thoughts. So every time that you talk to your audience, you need to make sure that they understand these benefits. They are clear about how to do the things and just clear the path, meaning that you provide the right solutions and alternative, the seeds, the water, etc. And you talk to them with the right messages. So every time that you start thinking about, again, behavior change, make sure that you have that. And for example, in here, once your audience is ready to make the change, we can add more information, if you want, at that point, about how their new or adapted behavior will also benefit our conservation species, like the ladybugs. And we can share how ladybugs will support crop growth, for example, by controlling pests, improving pollination, etc., and that for them will be extra. So just even think about how then, if you want, and you have kids, for example, around, and you want to promote some type of, being proud about what they are doing, you can start thinking about social marketing campaigns. that can provide joy and pride in adopting new and good practices that support, for example, materials and activities like the flagship species, radio songs, radio soap operas, and others. Whatever you think it could be beneficial for your target audience and they will like, because all audiences are different, you can start thinking on that, because that's another step, and we can cover that in a future training. But of course, having some type of emotions move into your target audience about how they are achieving with their economical or other benefits to preserve something special, like a ladybug or other insects, could be very powerful. But once they found the right solution and the right benefit for them. So please don't forget this. And yes, changing behavior is possible, as you can see, if you have all of this super clear. So I'm going to stop there and I'm going to see if you have any questions and answers. And of course, I want to, of course, thank you before of that. And you can reach out to me with my LinkedIn in that name. And yes, I'm open for any questions. Please go ahead.